The sky had turned a shade of bruised lavender by the time Sierra realized she was lost. The trail that had once been so well marked had vanished under her boots hours ago. She'd followed a game path too far, chasing a rare glimpse of the silver-antlered elk the ranger mentioned at the lodge. But the woods had their own way of swallowing you whole when you weren't careful. Now, dusk crept through the dense pines, casting long shadows that danced like spirits. The distant cries of birds grew quiet, and the chill settled deeper against her skin. Sierra hugged her flannel tighter around herself and tried to ignore the tightening fear in her chest. A loud snap underfoot broke her focus. She barely had time to glance down before it happened. Clang! Agonizing pain exploded through her right leg as steel jaws clamped tight around her calf. She screamed, a raw, primal sound that tore from her throat as she collapsed into the mossy earth. The rusty teeth of the animal trap bit deep, and blood quickly soaked her jeans. Her screams echoed across the trees, bouncing between trunks, unanswered. She tried to pry the trap open with trembling hands, but it wouldn't budge. The metal was old, crusted with rust, and cruelly firm. Panic set in as darkness fell fast and heavy. She shouted again, throat burning. "Help! Please! Somebody!" But only the wind answered. Miles away, Jack Rowan was gathering firewood near his cabin when he heard the first scream. He paused, half buried in a pile of kindling. The sound was faint, barely more than a whisper carried on the wind, but unmistakable. A human cry. He looked up at the treetops, listening. The second scream pierced the silence again. Without a second thought, Jack dropped the wood and ran for the shed. He yanked his pack from a hook, grabbed a flashlight, first aid kit, and hunting knife, then whistled sharply. His old hound, Boone, shot up from the porch and trotted beside him. "Come on, boy," Jack muttered. "Someone's in trouble." Sierra's breath came in broken sobs. The pain was relentless, hot, blinding. Her leg throbbed with every heartbeat, and her fingers were numb with cold. She could barely keep her eyes open, but she forced herself to stay awake. She'd tied her flannel around the leg as a makeshift tourniquet, but the bleeding hadn't stopped completely. Somewhere deep down, she knew that if no one found her by sunrise, she wouldn't make it. A crunch of leaves. She froze. Was that footsteps? "Hello," she croaked. "Is someone?" Light swept across her face, and Boone's bark echoed ahead of Jack. "Hey," a voice called. A man's voice. Sierra wept in relief as the beam of the flashlight landed on her. Jack dropped to his knees beside her in seconds. "Jesus, what happened?" "T-trap," she whispered. "I was hiking. Took the wrong trail." "All right. I'm Jack. You're going to be okay. I've got you now." Boone sat beside her, tail wagging gently, offering silent comfort. Jack examined the trap with a grim expression. "Old wolf snare. Illegal. Bastards still leave them out here." He slid his knife into the mechanism, leveraging it carefully. "I'm going to open it. This will hurt." Sierra nodded, bracing herself. With a grunt, Jack forced the rusted jaws apart, and Sierra screamed as the pressure released. Her body slumped back, half-conscious. Jack worked fast, cutting away the soaked jeans, cleaning the wound, and wrapping it tight. "You're lucky," he muttered. "Missed the artery, but there's some deep tissue damage." She barely heard him. By the time Jack lifted her into his arms, she was almost entirely limp. Boone trotted ahead, leading the way. Jack carried her for 2 miles through the dark, careful with every step. He murmured to her softly to keep her awake, telling her stories about his time in the ranges, about the stubborn dog beside them, about the cabin just ahead. When he reached the porch, he shouldered the door open and laid her gently on the old couch. He built a fire fast, its warmth spilling light across the cozy room. Then he set to work properly cleaning her leg under lamplight, checking for signs of bone damage or infection. Sierra stirred. "Thank you for finding me." Jack gave a quiet chuckle. "I didn't find you. Boone did." The hound gave a happy grunt from the rug. For 3 days, Sierra remained at the cabin. The snow fell heavy the next morning, blanketing the forest and making any return trip impossible. Her leg remained swollen, but Jack kept it clean and elevated. He gave her broth, kept the fire going, and even lent her a flannel that was way too big. They talked more each day. She learned Jack had once served overseas, lost some of his team to an ambush, and left the world behind to find peace in solitude. He learned she was a biology student, obsessed with rare animals and endangered forests, which explained her reckless solo hike. "You're lucky," he said once, while changing her bandage. "I know," she whispered. "If you hadn't heard me." He looked into her eyes, serious. "I don't believe in luck. I believe people are meant to cross paths for reasons." On the 4th morning, the snow began to melt, and Jack helped her into a makeshift crutch. She hobbled to the porch, staring out at the trees she'd once feared. "Do you ever feel lonely here?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, not anymore." She turned to him, searching his expression. "You've been alone too long." He gave her a soft smile. "Maybe I was waiting." They didn't say anything more, but the silence was warm between them. 3 weeks later, Sierra returned with a ranger team to flag the old trap sites and chart the dangerous terrain. Jack walked beside her the entire way, helping her over slopes and icy ridges. She wore his jacket, refused to take anything else. They found 3 more rusted traps. The rangers removed them. At the last site, Sierra paused. "This is where you found me." Jack nodded. She reached down and placed a small carved stone by the tree, a token, a memory. "I'm not scared of this place anymore." He smiled. "You faced it." "I wasn't alone." Months passed. Spring returned. And so did she. Sierra left the city behind after graduation. She came back to the mountains, not for danger, but for something she'd found in the wild that day. Or rather, someone. She built a life not far from Jack's cabin. They hiked together. Trapped no one, but rescued birds, patched fences, and planted new trees in the wake of old ones. Somewhere deep in the forest, if you listen closely, you can still hear the echoes of a woman's desperate screams from long ago. But now they're followed by the sound of footsteps, rushing toward her, not away. And a dog barking, joyfully, as 2 lives begin again, together.